Welcome to this week's Everyday Inclusion and Belonging, where we talk about everything under the sun as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. My name is Mo Berkner-Boyd. I am the founder of the Moxie Exchange and the Everyday Inclusion app. I'm a white woman, mid-length red hair. Today I am rocking black cat eye frames and a black and white striped shirt. Behind me is my bookshelf. I want to start today with a land acknowledgement. It's Indigenous Peoples Day. And I grew up here in the United States at a time when we used to celebrate Columbus Day. So just thinking about how far we have come. I am sitting on Ute and Arapaho land. And we had a great session, I guess it was probably about a year ago, talking about land acknowledgements. And one of the things that I really took from that is we're not just talking about history, we're talking about today. And what we can do to be allies today. And I think today is a really good time to think of that. I often will send, and we'll put this in the chat, there is a great app called Native Land that you can download. It's free. And you can find out in real time, wherever you might be traveling, whose land you're on, languages, treaties, right? And just get educated, right? And again, think about what you could be doing today to be an ally. So I'm super excited, Ritika, for you and I to have this conversation. So Ritika Singh and I met about a year ago at a conference, and it was great because it was an executive CDO event, and she stood up and said something, and I quite literally in my head said, I got to know this person. And so we met later that day, and it was great because people thought, Ritika, that we'd known each other forever, based on how we just started talking about life and the work. So please introduce yourself, and we're going to be able to dig in on how you got here and the great work that you're doing now.
Absolutely. My pleasure to be here. Mo is how I know you. And it doesn't feel like, that long ago when we met, but really it does feel like a very long journey we've been in the relationship that we've established. What a wonderful person inside out you are, and the work that you do to create the space for everyday inclusion for everyone. My name is Ritika Singh. I lead diversity, equity, inclusion for Serta Simmons Bedding, which is a manufacturing company based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We have about 18 manufacturing plants. The brand names that you may be familiar with is Serta or Beauty Rest, or Tuft & Needle is also one of them, Simmons. I'm based out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I grew up in India. I spent the first 20 years of my life in Pune, which is close to Bombay. People may be more familiar with that. So I'm living in Milwaukee, and the weathers were totally drastically apart. So I have been on that journey where I've lived in 6 different states in the US. In my journey, I've had the honor to work and lead in diversity, equity, inclusion for over 20 plus years for companies like ESPN, which is part of the Walt Disney Group, Prudential Financial, United Technologies, which had 6 manufacturing companies under its umbrella. Names that might be more familiar of their brands are Otis Elevators, the tallest elevator in the tallest Burj Khalifa building in Dubai, Carrier Air Conditioners, or Pratt & Whitney aircraft engines. I really started as an HR generalist. I've lived in states, California, Seattle, Connecticut, Missouri, now in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with always a hop, skip, and jump away from Atlanta, Georgia, which is where my leadership team is. We are a very flex, hybrid culture, I would say, at this time. And I'm really excited to go on this conversation with you.
Yeah, same. And I think you started, one of the things, so y'all, I haven't been able to see it yet, but Ritika was in a Bollywood video. So at some point, she has this past that is just amazing, that I think informs so much of how you do the work now. But I would love to hear, how did you get here? How did you end up with a start in HR? How did you end up doing DEI work?
So I'll say that it's the roots, and I truly believe that your childhood experiences, exposure, upbringing, knowledge, interests, that's values, that's what shapes you as a person. I truly think that that's what links to why I do what I do, because it gives me a sense of purpose and passion. As I was growing up, it goes back to, I mean, I can think about the professional aspects of how I got here, but really it started as a human aspect. In my family, my father really was very empowering. When I reflect in hindsight, I grew up with two brothers, and and there was never a space of, you can't do this because you're a girl or you're a different gender, or that wasn't, really in my face. And it was almost like you can achieve anything that you set your eyes on. We are here to support you. What are your interests? But you have to work hard. You have to achieve it on your merit. There's no shortcuts. And as in that journey, as I reflected more, and I, as an adult, started interacting with other people, I realized that that's not necessarily everybody's journey.
True. So true.
Yeah, especially on the lens of gender, especially on the lens of inclusion. It starts at home, as a person, how you're developed. And, also the adversity that you see around you, or that you may, interact with, builds and shapes you. So I lost my father at a very early age, the person who empowered me the most. And then I was in a very long relationship, I won't go into the details of, but that was the opposite of empowering. So had I not had the self-esteem and the empowerment that I had in my childhood, I don't think I would have shaped to lead the way I do today. But that goes back to, how did I connect with when professional opportunities came my way? So I did really believe in the value of education. That started from home. I have a bachelor's in business, a master's in economics and accounting, and then I pursued MBA in New York. As I was doing that, I had started a career in HR. So I've always been academic and passion both going together. So as I was doing my bachelor's, I was also doing a culinary arts degree for 3 years in India. So a fun fact, one of my classmates actually is a Michelin star chef in London and has won some of the Master Chef episodes, and is very recognized. If you see my LinkedIn, you'll probably find him. That said, it's a small world. It's about people. It's about relationships. And it's when you start connecting with people, I am very much a people person. That's what drew me professionally into where do I, although I had a business accounting degree, I was like, I want to work in the space where I am focused on people, on developing people, on connecting with people, on building better relationships, and started from an HR function, and then led to realizing, when I was volunteering with employee resource groups at United Technologies, I realized there is something called as a global diversity organization focus. I happened to be back then in, I'd say in early 2000s, that they had a global team of diversity inclusion. They were one of the organizations that did. Very invested in people and employee education, 60,000 employees globally, very strong supplier diversity program, internship program. And and they really promoted internal mobility. So after 2 years of serving as an HR generalist for Otis Elevators, I moved into their corporate diversity function, where I led diversity partnerships, strategic diversity recruitment, diversity initiatives for youth and internships and campus outreach. And that's really where my journey started and evolved from there into other Fortune 550, even nonprofit organizations, in leading diversity, equity, inclusion, both on the US, industry, local, and global lens. So we can take this conversation wherever you'd like more.
Well, and so what I love about that, y'all, if you were right, it was sort of and I believe this so much too, Ritika, people say that why'd you start Moxie? And I, can take them back to some incidents in second grade for me, right? Where it sort of set me on the path. And same thing, my parents will say, well, we never told you couldn't, so you always believed you could. And so I think the thread of so many people doing this work is that there is a bit of the roots are from when we're really young. And then what I love about your journey, right, is everything from culinary school and economics. And I think that what I love about your approach every time that we've been in conversation is how you really do take a 360 view, right? You're considering every aspect not just the passion piece of it. What's the economic reality here? What are the drivers? And I think that is such a skill set. And when you said you're a people person, that's like the understatement of the year. So let's talk about then the evolution of where Serta Simmons Bedding is. So that was the evolution of your career, right? You're one of those folks that have been doing this a long time. You have deep expertise. You've been in multiple industries, as you said, from nonprofit to global to high tech. And you came onto Serta Simmons at a time that I think was really critical. Where are y'all in the journey, and what do you think is next?
I'd say that it really is a journey. And I'd say that to think of a maturity curve, we're very much in our infancy or early stages as an organization. So we have a strategy, we have focus efforts, a roadmap about where our priorities are, how do we want to measure progress. But my role in the company, which is the head of diversity, equity, inclusion, only was created in the last year. So we've brought a lot more focus to it this year, but we're very early in our journey, and we know we have a lot of room to grow.
You know what? So you just threw out a lot, right? That you've accomplished in a year, and that the organization has accomplished in the year. So I heard measurement, I heard a strategy, I heard a roadmap. How'd you start? Right? When you came in, and I know that this is something that you're really good at, is coming in and sort of building out an approach. So it's your first day, or even you're in the interviews, Ritika, and you're talking about what you're going to do. What did you do the first 90 days, the first 6 months? How did you get to where you are now, where you're at the place to crawl and stand and walk and run? But first you needed to get the base in place.
Absolutely. And every diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, accessibility practitioner has their own approach. I will share mine, which over the years of having led D&I in different industries, different companies, I'd say no one size fits all. Every organization is different. What I'm doing at SSB may not have been how I've approached it somewhere else, right. But you really have to understand the needs of the organization, why they're investing in it. And like you said, it really starts at the interview for me. So when I am interviewing, they're interviewing me for my skill set, my background, my competency, what I bring. And I am interviewing them as an organization, as a leader. And I think it really starts at that top leadership commitment and that authentic investment. And, it's one thing to have a strategy on paper. It's another to put teeth behind your strategy and say, I'm going to invest in this. I want to see progress, and I want to make sure that I'm going to set you up for success. And that doesn't mean that we will not go in the space of trial and error, or we may not fail, or we may not, learn from our journey. We absolutely will. We have to be open, vulnerable to the learning process that follows. No matter how many years you've done it, there's a learning process in every organization. So I start with learning the organization, and I start with getting to know the leaders and people and their vision and their mission. And, we don't even talk diversity inclusion. I just want to know on a business lens, what's working, and what are some of their strategic objectives and priorities? What are they looking to accomplish in the next 3 to 5 years? Once I understand the business priorities, the organizational current state, with also a lens on, some of the trends. So I think we were talking about my academic background, finance, accounting, economics. It all comes into play.
Right.
When talking business, I would say, you really have to lead with the business opportunity when you're serving an organization. It's very different to lead diversity, equity, inclusion in a nonprofit space, or in a community space, or in a service space, versus an organization that is a business organization. And, there are community elements of it, which is one pillar, the marketplace elements of it, but there are also elements in the workforce. What does it mean? What does investing in your people look like? What does engaging your workforce look like? Do we understand what our gaps are? Do we have data and information? Are we taking data into consideration to inform the decision and the priorities that we are setting for ourselves? As an organization, have we done a company survey? What does that survey reveal to us? How did we act on it last time? What progress have we made? How are we communicating? All of these elements fall into really an assessment. Sometimes organizations bring in an external organization to do an assessment. I have done at a certain Simmons, I have done it myself. I've done an internal assessment, but I've had access to data and to people and done listening tours and tried to understand not data alone and not people conversations alone. I think both a combination of, and then your experience and background to help lay out, where do we start? How do you not set yourself for too much and too less as priorities and goals, and really define and then vet and validate that strategy and that roadmap from employees, from an employee lens, some representatives or voices of the customer, so that you are meeting the customer and the community elements as well. And then truly your leadership team, because they are the ones who own the accountability, not the D&I leader, not the HR leader, but the business leaders own the accountability to that roadmap and that plan. And that's really how I choose to set it up.
Well, full stop on that last statement, right? Like understanding where the accountability lies, because boy, we see a lot of organizations get that wrong, where they think the accountability sits in DEI, sits in the business, right? And with those business leaders. And y'all, if you think about the approach that Ritika took, it is like any really sound strategy, right? Starting with the data, with the people, with the culture. Where are you? What are the gaps? What are the numbers telling us? What are the people telling us? What are the business needs? And so you're building this, so it's just inextricably woven into the business, right? Not sitting separately, not coming in. And I loved what you said, Ritika, that you've done this differently at different organizations, because there is not a one size fits all. And so what SSB needed and what you discovered was very different than past organizations. So what do you, what are some of, well, let's talk first about what do you see as next for SSB, right? So now you've got the strategy, the roadmap, you know what you're going to measure. You've identified the gaps. What does the next year look like?
So I've put together a 3 to 5 year strategic roadmap with the agility to be able to change and adapt and review every 2 years. I mean, we can review it every year, but technically it takes time to some initiative objectives on that roadmap. I do have them outlined as an annual or even quarterly progress milestones, but I hope to take a deeper dive every 2 years and reassessing are our business needs, our current state, the external factors, are they different changes to it? How do we need to adapt to what the needs are with the direction that we're going in? And really, the next focus really is acting and communicating, so and that accountability.
So let's talk first just about, there are a couple of things that you said in there that I think are really key, right? A long-term strategy with the agility to adapt. One of my favorite quotes is actually Mike Tyson, the heavyweight boxer. It was his trainer, a manager, that said, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face. And I think there are some things in every, we can get hit in the face with something like COVID, or like an economic downturn, or like some legislation that's coming through, any number of things. So then the agility to adapt, but the commitment to a longer term vision. So not just adapting for adaptation's sake, right? A commitment to kind of the North Star 5-year, willing to really take a deep dive every 2 years, checking out every quarter to make sure you haven't gotten hit in the face. Right. And I like thinking it through in that way, because it doesn't make you so stringent that you're not flexible, you're not willing to adapt, and it doesn't make you so wishy-washy that the wind blows and you've changed your strategy. So there's a nice tension there between the two, like an appropriate tension. So I think that's awesome. So now let's talk about acting. What are some of the key pillars in the next year?
So for the first 12 months, some of the key pillars that I set around are, our people. So what are we doing in the internal facing lens for our workforce and our culture, and having very specific objectives and actions and KPIs, key performance indicators, on what will, reflect progress and help us reassess if we need to shift any of our priorities, or if we need to, accelerate or slow down somewhere. And also on a third lens, the external pillar, which is our community, our suppliers, and our customers. How are we connecting with that? I'd say overall, if you think about the whole strategic plan, it's very important to have very clear focus and defined objectives and priorities, because there is so much to do. Usually an organization that is starting very early and you can feel lost, like, where do I start? For example, we have employee resource groups, reestablishing, ensuring that they are set up for success. The leadership, structure is set up. There is executive sponsorship. There is mentoring for ERG leaders. There is value that you create between manager discussions of those who give time to lead or participate in employee resource group events and experiences. What does that look like? How do you bring that? Like, there's challenges along the way. How do you bring that to an hourly workforce or manufacturing or frontline workers? How do you, when you have a geographic footprint that is spread out in, across the US and Canada, how do you make sure that you're able to connect people and include everyone every day, right? Like Moxie Exchange goes by everyday inclusion. That is an everyday acting, that's not a one person or a one team. It's how you embed it as a priority and communicate, reinforce, transparently share progress, share metrics. I can give you some examples. Like, some of the things that we have done in the first year is we've set up a new hire orientation around diversity, equity, inclusion, where we share our strategy, we share our commitments, we share what our roadmap is with every new hire in the organization. We share how leaders and individual contributors in the organization can contribute to having a culture of inclusion and belonging. Launched a diversity, equity, inclusion index in our engagement survey that allows us to measure at a very granular as well as at a high level, the different elements of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And then we realized that the most work that we had to do in the DEI and B space was in the B. And so then we aligned development and training and culture sessions. I personally led inclusive leadership training sessions for over 300 leaders across the company in the first year, where every leader now knows and can articulate in his or her own voice, what is our company's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging? Why are we committed to it? How are we going to achieve progress? And what is your role as a team member and mine as a leader? How am I committing to you, and how can you commit to the organization to ensure that we are creating an inclusive and an experience of belonging for everyone?
I love, Ritika, that in that, first off, I love everything that you're saying. And I love in that training, you covered who, what, where, why, how, right? What's my role, right? And making sure, I love that you said every one of them can articulate now all of those things, right? That's clarity, right? That there is clarity there. So love that.
And I can go on and on because it's a year, but it feels like 3 years already.
Yeah.
In a good way of being able to accelerate progress.
Yeah.
It's also about how do you make sure that you're not the only one or the only team, or it's not HR specific or corporate headquarters specific or leader specific, but you are creating opportunities where all associates know and understand the why and the how. Yeah. Why are we committing to this, and how can I have a role in advancing this forward?
And I think, again, sort of pushing that and push might not be the right word, but everybody populating that within every single person, right? The what's my role, right? How do I impact this as, somebody who's a new hire, or how do I impact this as somebody who's an executive? Those answers might be different. And in some ways they might be the same, but everybody can answer that question. And I love starting right at new employee orientation, right? With this is who we are, this is what we believe, this is how we do this is why, and here's your role. So it gets baked into their experience from day one. Shifting off SSBM, just what are one or two best practices that you that just about any organization could benefit from? Because I know there are probably some things, Ritika, that you've taken, right? It's fingerprints. It looks different everywhere, and not every organization needs everything. But I bet there are one or two things that have been consistent across.
I would say what we've just talked about, taking the time to do a very thorough assessment. And when I say time, it easily takes me 3 to 6 months to do that leadership assessment that is customized, meaningful for the organization.
So that indicates deep listening.
Yes.
Right? You're not just doing it to say, oh, I went on a listening tour, right? Or I was looking at the data. You really are listening.
Absolutely. I mean, part of it is building trust, orienting yourself to the organization, creating a safe space for people to share openly, looking at the data. Certain places you may not have the data. There are organizations where you may not have metrics and data. Then how do you bridge the gap for that data and for that metrics? How do you make sure that you're including voices of everyone when you're setting priorities? You're not doing it in a silo, right? Because at the end of the day, if you want everybody to come together to help execute the plan, then you have to create the awareness and the willingness and the desire, and be able to articulate like the why for them, the value add for you, the value add for the organization, create a sense of pride. So that strategic roadmap, ensuring that that is very clear, specific, focused, easy to find. Anybody can, share, these are my company's priorities. This is what I'm focusing on this year. But also lining it up such that it is agile, it can be flexed, it's a living document that you adapt and change to based on business or customer or employee experience needs. And it's not scaled too far. Like, it's not necessarily a 10-year plan. Nobody knows where the world will be in 10 years right now. But it is, not just such a narrow scope where it's only 12 months. There's only so much you can achieve. Once you set a strategy, it takes time to see results and impact. So giving yourself grace. So if it's, I see if it's 3 to 5 years, that's a sweet spot. And then having leadership buy-in. So having very clear focus priorities that are measurable, that you can communicate clearly, having easy access so that everybody understands and aligns with it. And then having very clear leadership commitment. The voice of the leadership is very important in driving that accountability forward. And then the understanding that culture is not created in a D&I team or a corporate headquarters. It is created in teams. It's your peers, your managers who you work with in different settings, in different locations. Does your strategy and your roadmap allow you to do what the needs are in New Jersey versus California versus, Phoenix, Arizona? And are you in tune with those needs?
Yeah, we say like the peanut butter spread of the same thing for every region, every team. It doesn't work because it is so unique regionally and by team. I cannot wait to watch this again, Ritika, because every question that I've asked you, there've been like 10 nuggets in there that we could go down the path of just that one. And I knew this time was going to go fast. Would you please leave me with one last truth bomb about leading DEI work?
I would say that those who are not in DE&I roles have a very important role in advancing DE&I. And the truth bomb there is that it's not just those who are in an organization, part of an organization. We as citizens, as part of a community, we decide what organizations focus on. So my big eye is on the elections next year. And it's very important that people consider the DE&I lens in how they vote, because that informs legislation, that informs how organizations focus, where the funding goes, where the laws, the rules. We all know that the history of DE&I is embedded in how legislation or rules or laws or the legal aspects of what enabled, empowered, created advantage or disadvantage for certain groups of a society or not. And so I think that we, each individual, part of an organization or not, have a role to play. And we should recognize what our role is, and we should take that very seriously.
Thank you. Thank you so much to unpack on this one and learn from this one. Y'all, this series is about community. It's about learning together, and then it's about taking action. So pick one thing that Ritika shared and think about how you can implement that in your organization. Maybe it was a good reminder. Maybe it's something that you've thought about doing. Maybe it's something completely new. But the big thing is to do the next right thing. Take the next right step. So Ritika, thank you for sharing your brilliance. I appreciate it. And I can't wait to have a part 2 of this in a year or 2 years, where we can see the progress that's been made on acting on the strategy and the vision. So thank you, my friend.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. It is my honor to be here. And thank you for including me in this very important conversation.
All right, y'all, get out there and do the next right thing. We will see you next time on Everyday Inclusion and Belonging.